I don't really know how to start this, so I'm just going to start it. I was with someone for 2 years and 3 months. His name was, I'll call him Daniel. We met through work, not the same team, just the same building. The kind of situation where you see someone in the elevator enough times that eventually one of you says something. He said something first. He asked if I'd been to the new coffee place that opened up across the street. I said no. He said it was good. That was the whole conversation. I thought about it for 3 days. We started dating in October. By December, I thought he was the most attentive person I had ever met. By the following March, I had deleted 3 people from my phone because he got quiet every time I mentioned their names, and I told myself I was just being considerate. I'm going to tell you everything, but I want to say up front, I'm not telling this story to make him sound like a monster. He wasn't a monster. He was a person with a problem that he couldn't see clearly, and I was a person who kept trying to solve it for 2 years, and eventually I had to stop. So, the beginning. The attentiveness felt incredible at first. I want to be honest about that because I think a lot of people skip over it when they tell these stories, and then you end up wondering how someone could stay in that situation. And the answer is always because the beginning didn't feel like that situation. The beginning felt like someone who just really genuinely cared about you in a way that felt rare. He texted good morning every single day. He remembered everything. What I'd eaten for lunch last Tuesday, what I'd said about my coworker Sarah in a passing comment 3 weeks ago, the exact thing I'd mentioned wanting but hadn't bought yet. He showed up. That was the thing. He always showed up. If I was having a bad day, he was there. If something was funny, he was the first person I wanted to tell. For about 4 months, being with Daniel felt like being held by someone who had memorized you. The first sign came in February, about 4 months in. We were at a birthday party for my friend Jess. There was a guy there, old college friend of hers, completely irrelevant to me. I'd met him maybe twice in my life. At some point during the night, I ended up in a conversation with him for like 10 or 15 minutes about something. I genuinely cannot remember what, and Daniel was on the other side of the room. I didn't think about it in the moment. Why would I? It was a conversation at a party. In the Uber home, Daniel was quiet. When I say quiet, I mean the specific kind of quiet that has weight to it, the kind where you can feel it pressing against you from the passenger seat. I asked if he was okay. He said he was fine. He said it in the way where fine is clearly not fine, but you're also supposed to accept fine as the answer and move on. I pushed a little. He said, "You seemed really comfortable talking to that guy." I didn't know what to do with that. I said yes, he seemed nice. Daniel nodded and looked out the window, and we didn't talk about it again that night. I filed it away as a weird moment. One weird moment in 4 months of really good. That felt like a fair ratio. The second sign was smaller but more frequent. He started asking about my day in a way that felt different from before, more detailed, more specific. Like, not how was work, but who did you have lunch with? And did you talk to anyone new today? And was Marcus in the meeting or did he send someone else? I answered everything because I had nothing to hide, and I liked that he was interested in my life. It took me a while to notice that the questions were almost always about people, specifically about men, specifically about whether I'd been around them and in what context and for how long. I told my friend Priya about it in April. She made a face. I said, no, no, it's not like that. He's just really communicative. She said, okay. She used the voice she uses when she thinks I'm wrong, but knows I'm not ready to hear it. I know that voice very well. I've known Priya for 12 years. Things escalated around the 6 month mark, and I think about this now, and the timeline actually makes sense in a way I didn't understand while I was in it. We had gotten comfortable. The relationship had moved from the early stage to the real stage. And I think when the early stage anxiety of will she keep choosing me shifted into something more established, that anxiety had to go somewhere, and where it went was outward, toward everyone around me, toward every person who might theoretically be a threat. He saw a message on my phone. I want to be clear about the context. He didn't go through my phone. He was holding it because I'd asked him to read me the address of the restaurant we were going to, and a notification came in while it was in his hand. It was from a guy named Tom, who I had dated briefly, like genuinely briefly, 2.5 years before I met Daniel. Tom had texted to say he was going to be in the city for work and did I want to grab coffee and catch up. A completely normal text, the kind of thing that happens. Daniel read it. He handed me the phone without saying anything, and his whole face had changed. We sat in the car for 20 minutes without going to the restaurant. He kept asking why Tom still had my number. I said because I hadn't deleted it, because there was no reason to delete it. He asked if I still had feelings for Tom. I said no. He asked why I would want to have coffee with him if I didn't have feelings for him. I explained that you can have coffee with someone you used to date without having feelings for them, that adults do this, that it was a completely casual thing. He said he didn't think he could handle that. I said, okay, I won't go. He said he wasn't asking me not to go. I said it sounded like he was. He said he just wanted to understand why I'd want to. We went around like that for a while. I texted Tom that I was too busy. I told myself this was me making a choice, not him making it for me. The phone thing started around month 8. I'm using careful language here because I want to be accurate. He didn't go through my phone systematically and he never demanded my passwords. What happened was more like he would be near my phone, and if a notification came in, I could see him register it. If I left my phone face up and it lit up, there was this almost imperceptible shift in him, this tiny moment of alertness, like an animal hearing a sound. He never said, "Who is that?" directly. He said it indirectly. He got quiet. He became a little absent. And I knew that to bring him back, I needed to show him whatever had come in and explain it, even when there was nothing to explain. I want to describe what this is like to live inside of. You start narrating your own life preemptively. Before I'd even leave work, I would be composing the summary I'd give him, not because I was hiding anything, but because I had learned that if I mentioned someone and he didn't know who they were, it introduced uncertainty, and uncertainty introduced the quiet, and I hated the quiet. So I over-explained, I introduced context, I filled in details before he could ask for them. I became a really good narrator of my own completely ordinary days. And here's the thing about that, it works. If you just tell someone everything before they can wonder about it, they don't have to wonder, and so there's no incident. And so you start to think the system is working. You think, I've solved it. The relationship is smooth because I've figured out how to keep it smooth. You don't think about the fact that you've essentially taken on a second job managing another person's insecurity around the clock. I started canceling things, not because he asked me to cancel them, not directly, but because it was easier. If I said I was going somewhere and gave him all the context and he got quiet about it, the effort of bringing him back out of that quiet wasn't always worth whatever I was canceling. A birthday dinner here, a work thing there. A trip my college roommate was taking that I'd been excited about for months, I backed out with 3 weeks' notice because the thought of a weekend away, the thought of all the check-ins that would require, the thought of what his silences would feel like through a phone screen, it was just easier not to go. Priya noticed. She sat me down, not in a dramatic way, just in a hey, I want to talk way. She said she felt like she saw me less. She said she'd noticed I tended to check my phone a lot when we hung out. She said she wasn't trying to make it a thing, she just missed me and wanted to know if everything was okay. I cried. That surprised me. I hadn't realized how much I'd been holding. I told her some of it. Not all of it. I think I was still protecting him, still in the mode where his behavior felt like something that belonged to both of us, something I was partly responsible for managing. But I told her enough. She listened. She didn't say I told you so. She asked how I felt, and I said I felt tired. And she said, what are you tired of? And I said, I don't know. And she said, I think you do know. I went home and started a list. I don't know why, I just started writing down incidents, things that had happened that I'd filed away and moved past. The Uber home from Jess's party. The Tom thing, a fight we'd had in September because a male barista had written a little smiley face on my cup and Daniel saw it and went quiet for an entire evening. A dinner with my parents where he'd asked, on the drive there in a very casual voice, if my dad's coworker James was going to be there. James, who I had mentioned once, maybe 4 months earlier, having met briefly at a family thing, and the fact that he had remembered James, had filed James away, had been thinking about James enough to ask about him before a dinner. that had unsettled me at the time, and I had pushed the feeling down. The list was 2 pages long. I sat with it for a long time. I tried to talk to him. I want to give him that. I tried, more than once. The first time was in November of our second year. I said I felt like I was managing his anxiety about our relationship a lot, and that it was exhausting, and that I needed things to change. He heard this as me saying I was unhappy with him. He got quiet in a different way than usual, not the alert, suspicious quiet, but something that looked more like collapse. He said he knew he wasn't good enough for me. He said he was sorry. He said he'd do better. He cried. I spent the rest of the evening reassuring him. I went to bed feeling like I had done something wrong. The second time was in January. I was more specific. I said, when I come home and tell you about my day, I notice you ask certain kinds of questions, and when I give you answers that involve other men, something shifts in you. I said I didn't want to live in a way where I was constantly doing math before I spoke. He said he didn't know he was doing that. He said he trusted me. I said I believed that he believed that. He asked what that meant. I said I thought the issue was that he didn't trust the world around me, other people's intentions, other people's interest in me, and that his response to that was to want to shrink my world down to a size that felt manageable for him. He was quiet for a very long time. Then he said that's not fair. But he also, that same week, made an appointment with a therapist. I thought, okay, this is the turning point. It wasn't the turning point, or maybe it was a turning point, just not the one I wanted. He went to therapy for about 6 weeks. He stopped. He said the therapist wasn't the right fit. He seemed lighter for a little while, and then gradually, over about a month, we were back to where we'd been. Not exactly the same. He'd become slightly more careful about how the behavior expressed itself, slightly more aware of when he was doing it, able to catch himself occasionally, but the underlying thing hadn't changed. The current was still running under everything. I could still feel it. The thing that ended it, and I want to be careful about how I say this because it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't one big thing, it was a Sunday afternoon in March, 14 months after the first conversation, and we were at brunch. I was telling a story about something funny that had happened at work, and in the middle of it, I noticed I was editing in real time. I had started to say a name, a colleague, male, someone I'd mentioned before, and whose name had previously generated the quiet, and I rerouted mid-sentence. I changed the pronoun. I said this person I work with instead of his name. I did it without thinking. I had done it so many times by then that it was automatic. I stopped in the middle of the story. Daniel asked what was wrong. I said nothing, I'm fine. I heard myself say it, fine, in that specific way, and I thought, there it is. I've become someone who says fine in that specific way. I finished brunch. I was quiet on the walk home. When we got back to the apartment, I asked if we could talk. He sat down on the couch and I sat across from him and I said I didn't think I could do this anymore. He said, don't do this. I said I wasn't happy. I said I hadn't been happy in a long time. I said I loved him, and I also didn't think love was enough, when what was also present was this constant low-grade management, this editing of my own life to fit inside a shape he could tolerate. I said I had tried. I said I wanted it to work. I said I thought he needed to keep going to therapy and do that work for himself, not to save us, just because he deserved to not feel this way. He said a lot of things. He was sad, and then he was angry, and then he was sad again. He said I was giving up. I said I'd been trying for over a year, and trying alone doesn't work. He asked if there was someone else. And even then, even in that moment, even as I was ending the relationship, I felt the familiar reflex, the urge to over-explain, to give him every detail that proved the absence of another person, to narrate my own interior until he was convinced. I didn't do it. I said no. There's no one else, and I didn't say anything else. He left that night. He stayed at a friend's place. We texted for a few weeks after, logistics, some of the harder emotional stuff, and then that tapered off too. I still think about him sometimes, not with longing exactly, more with a kind of complicated tenderness. He wasn't cruel, he didn't mean to do what he did. He was genuinely trying to hold on to something he was terrified of losing, and the way he tried to hold it made it impossible to stay. The apartment felt very quiet for a while. The good kind of quiet, mostly, not the weighted kind. I went to Priya's birthday dinner. I talked to people at the party without calculating anything. I came home and I didn't have anything to explain. It was such a small thing, it felt enormous. I've thought a lot about what I would say if I were talking to someone in the middle of what I was in, and I don't think there's a script for it. I don't think there's a clean answer or a clear line where you know what to do. What I'd say is notice the editing. Notice when you're doing math before you speak. Notice when making something easier for them is making something harder for you, not once, not occasionally, but as a pattern, as a lifestyle, as the entire texture of being in the relationship. And notice the list if you ever find yourself making one. The list matters.